Hi, welcome to my presentation of my research, The Future of AI in Education, focusing on mitigation of cultural biases of African Americans in AI-driven personalized learning systems. For my research, I did a literature synthesis on AI culturally sensitive biases of African American students in personalized learning tool tutoring systems and educational standardized testing, because it's been around for a long time before we ever got into AI. I wanted to find out what training and design features can be integrated into these AI systems to recognize and adapt to the cultural and social emotional needs of African American students, thereby reducing biases in educational outcomes. I will look at representation and content, language and communication style, cultural stereotyping and algorithms, bias in assessment and feedback, access to high quality resources, and economic context in performance analysis in order to determine answers to my research question. What is artificial intelligence bias? Well, AI bias is a phenomenon that occurs when an algorithm produces results that are systematically prejudiced due to erroneous assumptions in the machine learning process. There are four types of AI bias that affect the outcomes of the information and data that you may receive. Confirmation bias is when an AI system relies too much on existing trends or beliefs in the training data, which can reinforce existing biases and overlook new patterns. Algorithmic bias, when systematic errors in machine learning algorithms produce unfair or discriminatory outcomes. Measurement bias, when the data used to train AI systems inaccurately represents the world or overemphasizes certain variables. Stereotyping bias, when an AI system reinforces harmful stereotypes, such as associating certain languages with specific genders or ethnicities. In my research, all four types of these data need to be addressed when trying to mitigate. My research questions are: how do AI-powered educational tools currently exhibit racial bias in the assessment and learning outcomes of African American students? What training and design features can mitigate biases in AI systems for African American students? And how do cultural and linguistic biases in AI algorithms impact African American students' emotional outcomes, educational outcomes? The methodology that I used in my search strategy for my research questions in my literature review were that I used the University of Alabama Scout Advanced Searching. I used the Alabama Virtual Library resources. I used the databases Academic Search Premier, Gale General OneFile, and ProQuest. I also utilized Google Scholar. What I found interesting in this is that with Google Scholar, I got better results when I used a question type format than I did when I just used search terms. Search terms work better in all the other databases that I used. Some of the search terms that I used were, of course, the major ones: African American, AI, biases, educational technology. Um, then I delved deeper into it when I found other terms and got more specific. Things they cannot have is healthcare and judicial. When I did my searching, a lot of times it brought up healthcare and, of course, judicial. So it was hard to get those to come out. I did use the Boolean term, not with healthcare and judicial. And while it did knock out most of the judicial stuff, I still got a lot of information about healthcare while I'm doing it. For the data extraction and analysis, I used a whiteboard that listed the key words and phrases of my research, and as I went through each of my papers, I listed them under the best category for each. Those categories were representation and content, sociolinguistics and African American vernacular, mitigation of bias in assessment and feedback, cultural stereotyping and algorithms, and socioeconomic context. Yeah, I ended up with a nice flow of articles for each one of these. In my literature review, I found that AI algorithms can exhibit several specific biases that disproportionately affect African American students, including data bias due to information used to train the algorithm. The features used to train the AI models may inadvertently correlate with race, underrepresentation of cultural diversity. AI systems fail to understand cultural context or linguistic nuances of African American communities, and a lack of transparency where many algorithms operate as black boxes, making it difficult to identify and address the biases within them. Addressing these biases requires diverse training data, ongoing evaluations of AI systems, and inclusive development practices that consider diverse perspectives. Also, socioeconomic context in learning and texting performance has been an issue in education, so it's also going to be an issue in the AI algorithms. Under-resourced schools fall victim to having old, outdated resources and may not be able to afford the technology tools needed to keep up with the other funded areas. The digital divide is real, and it continues to create problems for the African American communities. Ways that AI content reflect cultural biases are in content representation. AI systems often rely on existing databases to generate content. If these databases lack diverse cultural perspectives or fail to include African American voices and experiences, the educational materials may not resonate with or reflect the background of these students. The sociolinguistics and African American vernacular, these are the language and dialect that the systems use in their training data. AI tools may prioritize standard English, which can marginalize students who use African American vernacular or other dialects. This can create a disconnect and affect students' engagement and understanding. Cultural references. AI-generated content might include references, examples, or narratives that are predominantly aligned with white middle-class experiences, thereby alienating African American students who may not see themselves or their culture represented. Bias in assessment tools. The AI system that assesses student performance may be calibrated on biased datasets, leading to unfair evaluations of African American students. This could impact their placement in advanced programs or their overall academic opportunities. And last, stereo reinforcement of stereotypes. If not carefully monitored, AI systems might inadvertently reinforce negative stereotypes by promoting biased content or learning paths that align with preconceived notions about African American students. This brings me to my methodology for mitigation. We're going to do a literature review, case studies, interviews and focus groups, content analysis, surveys, and comparative analysis. We'll conduct a thorough review of existing literature on AI biases, focusing on studies that specifically address the impact of African Americans. I'll look at previous instances of biased outcomes with case studies and conduct interviews or focus groups with AI developers and affected individuals to gather qualitative insights on cultural sensitivity and examine the representation of African Americans in datasets used for training AI models, and develop a survey to access public awareness and perceptions of African American biases among different demographics. Compare AI systems that have been designed with cultural sensitivity in mind against those that have not had to evaluate the effectiveness of the various strategies in reducing bias. In the mitigation of bias in assessment and feedback for the personalized learning systems, we need to analyze algorithmic bias, investigate how AI algorithms used in the educational tools may inadvertently favor certain demographic groups over African American students. We need to look at the impact of data representation and explore how the underrepresentation of African American students in training databases affects the effectiveness of personalized learning systems. We need to look at cultural bias and learning materials and examine how AI generated educational content may reflect cultural biases that disadvantage African American learners. We need to do case studies of AI implementation and conduct case studies on specific schools or districts that have implemented AI and personalized learning and analyze the outcomes for African American students. We need to get teachers' perspectives on AI tools, survey educators to understand their perceptions of AI tools and their effects on African American student learning experiences. There are longitudinal effects of AI bias, so we need to study the long-term academic outcomes for African American students who have interacted with biased AI systems compared to those who have not. We need to look into the ethical AI frameworks in education and propose frameworks for developing ethical AI tools in education that specifically address the needs and rights of African American students. We need to have parental and community insights and do research the views of the African American parents and the community members on the use of AI in education and its perceived impact on their children. We need to do policy recommendation. We need to develop policy recommendations for educational institutions to mitigate AI bias and promote equity in personalized learning environments. And last, we need to do a comparative analysis of educational outcomes of the African American students using AI-driven personalized learning tools with those who use traditional methods. Criteria that will be used to evaluate the algorithmic fairness in assessing how equally the system treats different groups. This can be done by analyzing accuracy, precision, recall, or error rates of an AI system for different groups and assessing if there are any disparities or gaps. Within AI personalized learning systems, you can look at the inputs, features, models, or decisions of an AI system and see if they reflect or amplify any biases or prejudices. To measure the effectiveness of the intervention, this will require creating an experiment that has questions with and without cultural biases and comparing the accuracy of the assessment results to two different student groups, a diverse class and an all-white class. Data will be collected and analyzed through surveys and interviews with African American educators, students, and cultural experts. Challenges include monitoring and auditing fairness performance because it is essential for tracking outcomes, measuring the disparities, and verifying fairness claims. Measuring fairness across changing contexts is one of the primary challenges. What is considered fair in one context may not be in another. So, to mitigate these biases, it's essential to use diverse and representative data, involve educators, instructional designers, and community members in the development process, and continuously evaluate the impact of AI systems on all students. Implications for instructional technology and designers include vetting the software and tutoring systems about how they train their systems and what data is used to ensure equitable fairness. The algorithms behind digital learning technology are programmed by human developers, so a lack of diversity in software development can mean technologies don't account for the experiences of every student. Asking how they make sure their product is culturally representative, how do they integrate diversity into their question design and answer feedback, in order to make sure that students aren't underrepresented just because they are marginalized. They got to having written test questions before, I can say that the task is not easy as it sounds, because writing a question that is designed to make sure that it's fair for everybody takes practice and skill. In conclusion, while some AI developers and companies are making efforts to address cultural sensitivity by creating diverse database sets, hiring inclusive teams, and following ethical guidelines, many still fall short in these areas. The failure to use representative data, engage with minority communities, and prioritize fairness over profits leads to a biased system that disproportionately harms underrepresented groups, such as African Americans. To effectively address these issues, companies need to adopt proactive approaches to bias detection, foster their diversity in their teams, and involve communities in their design of the system. Thank you for coming to my presentation. Have a great day.